Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and guess what? We're starting a brand new show, and so, Death Note, huh? I'll be honest, I have been wanting to watch Death Note for a very long time. It's been on my radar for years, and I just never have gotten the courage to sit down and start watching it. And so when I started this channel back over a year ago, I'm like, well, you know what? I'll just wait. And then if I eventually do like a retro poll, because it's been out a while, I will go back and just maybe put it on the poll and see if it wins or not. Lo and behold, it did. So I'm really excited. Now, I'm watching it through Crunchyroll, and they say it was released on December 16th, 2019. But I know the series is back from like 2006. So it's been around the block for a while. And so I've heard that the sub is good, I've heard the dub is good, and I couldn't decide because to be honest, I was leaning towards the sub because Miyano Mamoru, I have heard, is the main character in this. I love Miyano. He's an amazing voice actor. And so I was like, well, I kind of want to do the sub, but then a lot of people said the dub is good. So I let Patreon decide. I'm like, y'all are paying me to watch this, so what version do you want me to watch? And the majority said that they wanted me to watch the subs. So I am going to watch the original sub for this. However, I am going to go back after each episode and before I watch the next one, watch the English dub and see just what all it's about and come back and report to you all about it. So if you're just joining me on this channel for the first time, I go into these shows blind. I know virtually nothing about these shows usually. This show's been around a while. The only thing I know about it is that there's a character named Light. I'm assuming that's the main character. And I know that he finds a notebook, and if he writes their name in the notebook, they die. That's all I know about the show. That was the big thing. Like, oh, if you write... I've seen the memes where he's scribbling names and people die. That just like in just random immediacy. So I'm assuming that happens pretty early on in this series. But that's literally all I know. All I know is that he finds a notebook, writes names in it, and people die, and there's some kind of monster involved. Because there's like a creepy monster. That's it. So otherwise, I'm going into this show blind. It just never seemed like the type of show that I would watch. I always kind of lumped it in with Attack on Titan. And I was like, I'll never watch that. And then Attack on Titan won a poll in here. And so I've been watching that the last year. And from watching Attack on Titan, I thought, okay, if I can handle that, I can surely handle this. So Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 2 is ending, and so I decided, you know what, I've had enough people recommend this show. It has been recommended dozens upon dozens of times. When Attack on Titan's over, I'll just watch it. And here we are. So, Death by Saturdays is going to be from here on for a while. We're going to be watching Death Note. So, there's 37 episodes, which is an odd number for a season, but I'm assuming it covers a lot of the manga. I'm excited. It's going to be fun to go back to something that I know has been around for a while that you all have probably seen. My biggest thing is please don't spoil me. Everybody's really great about not spoiling. So in the comment section, I don't have a moderator right now. So in the comment section, if you do see a spoiler, please be polite, be civil. We're all adults here. And just ask them, hey, can you put that under a spoiler tag? Or, maybe skip a few lines or edit that out. And because I like to read all of the comments, but if I start seeing spoilers, I'll stop reading the comments. And I want to talk to you all about the shows. So that being said, just kind of help me to do the best I can to avoid spoilers, and I'm pretty excited. But with that being said, let's not waste any more time. I'm so psyched, y'all. I've been waiting all week. I've been out of town for a week. I came back this weekend home, and I was like, the first thing I wanted to do is I want to go ahead and watch Death Note Episode 1. I just want to watch it. So that's what we're going to do. But in any case, I hope y'all are excited, but we are going to dive in to Episode 1 of Death Note and just see what all the hubbub's about. So, in any case, we're going to start that here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh my gosh. I'd say what have I signed up for, but you guys suggested this knowing I've watched Attack on Titan and some other shows, so you guys know. And I'm watching Neon Genesis Evangelion at the same time. I'm like watching a trifecta, right? I finished Attack on Titan and then I start Neon Genesis and Death Note. I feel like it's the perfect, what a back-to-back, right? Yeah, okay. I don't want to get into Attack on Titan spoilers, but all I will say is, and I'll put it up here for like the next 30 seconds to a minute. I'm just going to get it out of my system now. So if you don't want Attack on Titan Season 4 spoilers, just wait until this is gone. It may be longer than 30 seconds, but let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. Let me just get it right off the bat. There has to be some kind of influence from Isayama with Light. And Light is like if Eren and Armin had a baby. Like, Light is like, what if Armin had Eren Yeager's resolve and personality, but Armin's intelligence? That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. It's terrifying, and I'm already seeing lots of parallels that I'll probably talk about in the Discord. So if you're a patron, we're going to talk about in the Discord, probably in the Attack on Titan Discord, about this. We'll probably talk about it there in the channel for Attack on Titan, but I'm already seeing like Light and Eren parallels, and the idea about how I'm the only person who can save the world, and won't it be great if I use this power that only I have to wipe out all of the bad people? And there's problems with that, and we'll talk about that in the non-Attack on Titan spoilery things for the rest of this discussion, but I'm seeing things, I'm seeing parallels. I'm getting flashbacks. I'm getting Attack on Titan helicopter blades spinning in the distance. And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, if you are a patron in the Discord, we'll talk about that. Sure. And if not, that's the end of the Attack on Titan spoilers. If you want to talk about it below what I just talked about, and you're not a patron and you're not on the Discord, then you can comment below and just tag Attack on Titan spoilers for season 4, part 2, and we'll just go from there. I haven't read the manga for Attack on Titan. I've not read the manga, so I'm anime only for Attack on Titan, so don't spoil me on that, but we'll definitely talk about it below. But yeah, so this episode, wow, lots of things happening at once. I felt like I looked up at the timer because I have, like, where I'm recording, I have my timer, and for a second I'm like, I feel like the episode's almost over, and then I looked up and we were only 11 minutes in, and I was like, we're only halfway. Huh. Okay, so we already have Ryuk, who I love, and Light, who's okay. Already, who's Mamoru is playing. You can't really, it's funny because this is one of Miyano's earlier series, and so it is a little bit harder to distinguish. I feel like Yuji Kaji, who is the voice of Eren in Attack on Titan, Miyano sounds a lot like him in this. It's interesting, like his voice pattern sounds a lot like Yuji Kaji's, which I'm like, I wonder if Yuji based some of that off of this character and that voice acting. I don't know. They sound just very similar as characters in this, but two bored beings, a bored human and a bored death god with nothing else to do, and a notebook that is that has omnipotent power. What could go wrong? I feel like we cover a lot in this first episode, like thematically, plot-wise, character-wise. We set up a lot of things, and there is so much interesting things happening in these scenes in this first episode. If every episode is going to be like this and just chocked full of stuff, then we're going to have a lot to talk about. But oh my God. Okay, so let's just dive into this. Wow. The art style in this, I really like the art style. I feel like shows around the early 2000s into late 2000s had this kind of like, not realistic, but they're animated, but it's not exaggerated in any way, right? It's a very, not hyper realistic, but just realistic enough, especially like the settings and everything. The proportions, things like that. I love the idea of Ryuk, the death god, handing the apple, the forbidden fruit of knowledge, to Light. And so in the opening, we're going to talk about the opening as we go through the series. I'm very curious. Lots of biblical imagery. I feel like with Neon Genesis in this, there's just lots of imagery with it too. But so we get the idea of the Shinigami world. So it almost looks like it looks like a mouth. Like it looks like a throat, like an esophagus. It's going through, and then you go through these teeth like a mouth into the belly of the beast, it seems, whatever that equates to. And you have the Shinigami world, which is a very dreary world. It's very drab, dreary. There's bones everywhere. It's very minimalist. It just looks like a boring world. And Ryuk is just sitting there bored. And he's very similar to Light. He just does not have any enthusiasm. And there's lots of Shinigami, lots of scythes, lots of Shinigami. It's weird because it looks almost like the belly of a beast, but then there's caverns and rock formations. But he just seems bored. He says that all they have to do now are just sit there and wait for people and write names in books, wait for people to die, and then just go about their day and nothing's happening. Which I'm assuming, if we're getting to like biblical imagery, like maybe like, the rapture hasn't happened, and so it's post-apocalyptic times, and so they're like, well, we got nothing to do, we just wait until something happens, and Ryuk is just bored. But the Shinigami realm is interesting, because I was a big fan of Bleach back in the day, and the Shinigami world there is just like a parallel world to the human world. It just is different in certain ways, but this is otherworldly. This is very alien. It's a very alien setting. It's very like dystopic, just bare bones, right? And we get to see a few of the Shinigami. So we see this one that looks like a skeleton with its head down. So it looks like it's snoring. We see this one in a Native American headdress. Okay. 2000s, they were a different time. All right. And then we have Ryuk, who's like, and they say what? 2 death's heads again. So they're just gambling bones. But the skulls aren't human. They're almost like the bones of the Shinigami. And he established in this that in the Death Note, you can't write Ryuk's name. You can't write a Shinigami's name in the Death Book. Nothing happens. It's just for humans. But God, there's so much that's revealed in this episode. And so yeah, they have nothing else to do, so they're just gambling. And so it seems like the Shinigami have always invited Ryuk to join in, but he's just like, nah, I don't want to. He's like, I'm okay. I don't want to take part in it. And I love the transition of we have the one eye that is Ryuk's, and then we cut and have the other eye that is Light's, Yagami. What a fun name, Light. Like, just, it seems appropriate, right? He wants to be a god. He has a name for it, you know. And so this class, I love how the atmosphere of a show, and I want to say that the creator of this series has taken a page from Neon Genesis in a way, because the way the classroom is set up, you have our character, and it's just, I like that they have English written on the board, but they're translating, so they must be translating the sentence from English back to Japanese, because he doesn't say it in English, he just says it in Japanese. I know Mamoru can speak English, so interesting. But what I like about this, what it's taking a page of from Neon Genesis, just this, and probably from other series too, you could argue, but the one I'm watching now, I see the parallel, is that this teacher is trying to reach out to the students. None of the kids are paying attention. They're all just reading comic books, gossiping. They're being the least attentive class. I think even Western classes would be like, well, at least listen to the teacher a little bit. But no. And so you have Light just being the only one that seems remotely invested, but he's the prodigy. He's the top of the class. And he translates, says, follow the teachings of God, then the blessings of the sea will become bountiful. So if you follow the will of God, then you'll be rewarded. And there will be no storms. So that just seems like a little foreshadowing of this. But here's the thing. Light seems to have this like great grand plan of wanting to do, it's you know, the hero thing, the call to action, and that the hero is like, I'm going to save the world. And so he instantly is like, yeah, I've got this book. I'm going to write people's names in it and kill all the bad guys. And then they'll just be kind people and they'll revere me as their savior. And it's like, we'll talk about that though. We'll get into it. But yeah, I like that idea that they set this up, the idea that Light has, and he seems all gung-ho. It seems like almost a representation of his own beliefs, that if you follow the will of God, you will be rewarded from it and you won't suffer, right? Well, if he's viewing himself as a god, if people just do what he says, then they won't suffer. And it's like, aha, interesting. Okay, that seems like a foreshadowing that he's going to be using this Death Note as like a hostage situation for people. And we're going to talk about that later. But they frame Light as this character that did listen to the teacher. He seems like a good student, or a model student. And he's walking back home, and all he hears and all he sees are just these stories over and over again about murder and homicide and connections and just people being arrested and just this awful stuff going on in their world. And he's just constantly feels like he's bombarded with these bad scenarios. And he even just, he has like the dead eyes, and he says day in and day out, it's the same thing over and over again. Like he's just sick and tired of hearing about all these bad things happening in the world. And then you cut to Ryuk, who's like, it's so ridiculous. Like he's just experiencing the same thing over and over again. But there's no death in Ryuk's world. There's no death there. They're just all just sitting there bored. And in Light's world, he's like, it's just the same old, just death and destruction. And he says, this world is rotten. And that's funny because, yeah, I agree on Light's part that as Light is experiencing the world, it's rotten and there's just evil and destruction everywhere. And for Ryuk, he says this world is rotten, but I guess it doesn't seem like there's no big battles. Everybody's just sitting around doing nothing. So maybe in Ryuk's case, it's that sloth, it's that laziness, and just there's nothing going on. So to him, it's like it's rotten. It's just sitting here decaying. There's nothing happening. And so, and in Light's case, the nothing is happening is that nobody's stopping these people from doing evil. So this episode is called Rebirth, which is like the rebirth of Light, perhaps. But yeah, so Light is a third year, which I feel is an interesting choice by the mangaka because in that case, he's a third year, so he's going to be thinking about his future, and he's probably going to be graduating soon. So he's probably thinking about like what career he's going to be getting into. I'm curious to know what his career plans were after high school before he found the Death Note. Because his parents have been all about him in these entrance exams. So he clearly was thinking about going to a university to get a degree in something. And he's very smart. So I don't know if it was medicine. I don't know if it was law. I don't know like what it was. But it seems like he was going to school for something and going straight to a university. So I'm curious if we're going to find out what that is. Plans may have changed now that him and Ryuk are together. I can't believe he's already met Ryuk. I thought that Ryuk and him were like, I thought we were going to get previews of this Shinigami based on the first 5 minutes of this episode. But then I thought that it was going to take like an episode or two before we even got him and Light meeting. No, they're like instantly on the same page. And so yeah, the Death Note falls. And it almost seems like Ryuk dropped the Death Note into the real world out of sheer boredom because he didn't have anything to do. And he was like, why not? Let's just drop this notebook that has omniscient powers into the human world and just see what happens because he's bored and he wants something to do. But here's the thing. He had 2 notebooks. 2 notebooks. He's dropped 2 of them. That means somebody else has the other one. So there's a mystery element to the show already that I'm like, yes, please. Someone else has the other Death Note. Okay. So that opens up a whole big can of worms. I'm curious to know if Light, honey, you just killed all these people randomly at once, if the person that has the other Death Note is going to look at that and be like, it's weird all these criminals and people that have done evil deeds all died within like 5 days of each other on a mass scale. If they've had the other Death Note, we don't know how long it's been since Ryuk lost the prior Death Note and what's happened since then. And that's a very cool mechanism that if you give the Death Note to someone else, you lose memory of it. So if Light ever gives it to someone else, he'll forget about it. He'll forget he ever had it. That's genius. That's such a great little clause to have in there because it's such a fail-safe for a writer to be like, okay, once it passed on the prior person, they lose their memory of it. So who's to say that once they die, if they die and Ryuk writes their name in the Death Note, then Ryuk just doesn't take the other book back and it's like, okay, cool, thanks. So it's almost like it's the funniest thing. It's the funniest like Faustian deal with the devil, kind of like Black Butler sort of thing, but it's with like not an angel, but a death god. So, But yeah, the animation also on Light's face at times is, the animation on some of these characters' faces, it is interesting. It's very bizarre, right? It's very bizarre. It's almost like not a horror anime, but kind of. It looks kind of horrific, but yeah, the notebook just fell out of the sky. He just dropped it. And here's the thing. I thought at first that maybe Ryuk was kind of like the Shinigami of Bleach, where they go into the human world to harvest the souls of the dead. But no, they really just stay in this realm, out of sight, out of mind, and just write in the notebooks from up there. Kind of like watching over, like guardian angels watching over the real world. So Ryuk just intentionally dropped this notebook, just being like, let's see what happens. And the worst person imaginable. I don't think Light is the person, oh God, we'll talk about this, to get this notebook for reasons. But oh my God. But he picks it up. But this is the funny thing about it, because Light is established as an intelligent character. And so he reads it in English. And the whole English, the reasoning for the English translation is genius. And we'll get into it. And he explains, and he thinks it's just a chain letter. He's like, oh, this is dumb. Nope. But the temptation, too smart for your own good. The temptation is too much. And he's going to leave it there. He's like, that's sick. And at first it ties to his character because his character hates all the death and horrible things happening in the world. So of course, a book reveling in that, relishing in death, he'd be like, that's disgusting. I don't want anything to do with that. But he's established the book has like a seductive power to it. Like it is like, there's a seduction. I love that as he's saying, like, come on, what a joke. The light shines on him. It's too tempting. And he can't just leave it. And he establishes with Ryuk later, he's like, this notebook has like a power over it, a presence. And I love that the moment he turns back, we cut to that train crossing, and you know that he got it. You know he went back and picked it up, but it's such a fake out. But yeah, but he has the death note. Something's the matter with me. And it's that book has a power. Mm-hmm. And so he goes over these rules. So the death note, and I think that these are really cool caveats that are set up in the story and the world building, that you have to know the face and the name of the person in order to kill them. That you can't just write a random name. It has to just be, you have to intentionally have a face, otherwise it won't work. You can't just write a name and it just happen. You have to see their face. That's a pretty big caveat. And people sharing the same name will not be affected. Case in point. If the cause of death is written within 40 seconds of writing the person's name, it will happen. If the cause of death is not specified, then they'll die of a heart attack. So that's kind of insane too, because what if you write down the name of the wrong person and then there does seem like there's an erase function. It doesn't specify that you can erase or stop it. Once it's written in the notebook, it's going to happen. And I like the fact that it takes 40 seconds. It's not instant. That seems like a foreshadowing thing too, that Light is going to accidentally write the name of someone and realize he's wrong, and then it's too late and he can't go back and change it, and he has to just sit there for 40 seconds and wait for the person to die. That seems like it's going to lead to that to happen. I'm not looking forward to that moment, because that seems like it's a thing the mangaka's put in to be like, this is going to happen. No take backsies. Once you write in the notebook, it's a done deal. I'm like, ooh, okay. Because there's no seeming function. After writing the cause of death, details of the death should be written in the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds. So that's the thing. Did he do that with any of these characters? He's like, it's almost like a report writing. I used to teach a report writing class for criminal justice students. And in that class, they have to file a report that after they arrest someone or after something happens, they have to write a report about it to like detail what happened very objectively, or as objectively as possible. So Light has not done these reports, I don't think. I don't think he's written like the cause of death and the thing after in the 6 minutes and 40 seconds after like he's supposed to. I don't think he's done that unless we go back and look and he's, covered his tracks. It doesn't seem like that's the case. All he derives from that is that so you can let people die peacefully or make them suffer. Kind of like the power of God. And he just, at times, and he kind of praises the prank for being intricate. He's like, well, it took a lot of thought to think up something like that. So I guess that's kind of cool on their part. They took the time to think about this. Write their name. And so, yeah, it's just, he's tempted, right? It's just too tempting. And he says it's stupid. He says, this is so stupid. I also want to comment that for being early 2000s, the computer that Light has is a giant computer. It's a nice computer. So I'm going to guess that Light's family's middle to upper class, because of they seem to be pretty well off. But yeah, it just looks, and he looks so innocent. It's kind of crazy. Like the way they draw him, he just looks over kind of innocent. And then the animation style just gets like super fast paced. I love how quick and fluid the animation gets. It's great. And then he gives the all-important question. If someone actually dies, does that make me a murderer? Yes. Yes, it does. So yeah, you've killed someone, right? You've taken a life. You've done the same thing that those people have done, right? And that's what kind of gets into the crazy part about this series so far, is that Light is establishing that I'm doing good. I'm killing the bad people. And Ryuk doesn't correct him, because Ryuk's bored. Ryuk's like, okay, human that thinks you know how this all works. Okay, interesting. He just seems like, okay, surezies. And so, but Light, it's that I know what's good for society, and I know, it's kind of like one of the scenarios where, knowing perspective is important. And so you can't know why someone did what they did until you have the full story. And the thing of it is, none of the characters that Light has killed so far have been people he's known. They've all been random strangers that all he knows is their face and their name. He knows nothing about their story. And you can argue that, yeah, there's serial killers and murderers out there who have done these acts, these heinous acts, out of cruelty, out of just evil intent. Like, yeah, you could argue that for sure. But then there's other characters, like I've said in other series that I've reacted to, because my major is in conflict resolution, that we've watched things about series where someone, accidentally, they were trying to rob a grocery store and they panicked and they accidentally shot someone. And yeah, it's awful. It's terrible. They took a life. But there's more to it than they were just an evil person and they're like, I'm just going to shoot this person. Like, there are accidents that have happened and sometimes there's more to the story than you initially know. And in the case of these people that Light have murdered, now, obviously, he had the computer pulled up. You could argue that he has researched these people. And yeah, he may have found out that all these people in prison that have committed these acts were doing these acts out of evil intent. Okay, I would give Light that maybe he's researched the people enough over the last 5 days that he knows they were just people that mentally did these things out of cruelty. Okay, we don't know that for sure though. Or did he just do a Google search of like the people that have been arrested for homicide in the last 30 days and he just started writing names and didn't do any research? That we don't know yet, right? I want to see, because like the guy that was trying to assault the woman at the gas station, yeah, he could physically see him doing that act. And that's why he was the only one that he wrote an actual cause of death, like him getting hit by the truck. Like, he made him suffer, right? He made him suffer because he watched him do the act. He knew there was evil intent. So there's that, right? But then the other guys, he just sees them on the news and says, oh yeah, they're bad, and just writes their name down. But the question is, did he do his research on all of those people, or did he just look up a report and say, okay, these are all the bad guys, I'm just going to write their name down, and didn't research them at all? That's what's going to be interesting, is if he just starts writing names, because here's the thing too, perspective is important, and how the media portrays people. What happens if someone does a smear campaign against somebody and frames them for something, and they were innocent? What if you got somebody who was framed for murder and was innocent, but they were just convicted and said they were guilty in court, but they're actually innocent in jail and you just killed them? So there's so much going into this already that's kind of insane. And when he asks the question, if someone actually dies, does that make me a murderer? Yeah, that's by technical definition, yeah. But then he counters that and says, no way, that's impossible. And he smiles at that. He's like, I'm not going to be a murderer. This is just a hoax. It's fine. But how he views himself is kind of crazy in this, right? Again, here, I guess this is the first example that he's taken people hostage. This assailant that's killed. And they do establish the first man he kills did murder people, and he had been taking people hostage. And so Light says, okay, this person's doing bad things. He's committed crimes. He's still actively committing crimes. So I'll write his name in and we'll see what happens. And then he almost turns the TV off, but then he doesn't. And then it shows that it worked. It's kind of insane. And I like the tiny little like micro expressions on here where I like that the animation just shows he's like, Like, he just has the tiny little expressions like, oh, it didn't work. Oh, well. But then it did. The way this animation is, it's kind of insane. And then there's sometimes where his face looks so sincere and like happy. And then there's other times where he just looks like shocked. And the animation is really, really good in this. But yeah, the suspect has died inside the daycare and he's like, oh. But his eyes getting red, like his eyes are naturally brown. But by the end of this episode, his eyes are like that red color. And it's, red is usually like associated like with darkness or evil perhaps in this case. But no, he's the hero. I love it. I love how they framed this so far. He's like, it's coincidence. It's gotta be coincidence. So at first in all of this, and he has a prep course, like a nightly prep course. And that's why he's out there at night. That makes sense. So at first, he just did this on a whim. There was a man doing an evil thing, an evil act. But as you notice, the episode goes on, he starts thinking about this. When it gets close up, his eyes like flash back and forth from being red or not. I have theories about this whole deal, about once you use the death note, what happens to you, because you can't go to heaven or hell. That's a fun caveat to find out after the fact, right? We'll talk about this, right? We're watching Death Note. But, so, this is the part that gets interesting. So he sees these jerks, right? And they are jerks. They're stealing money from this guy, which is, bad. He shouldn't do that. And so, I like that Light says no. And the answer is, he looks over to those guys and you think, oh God, is he thinking about killing these guys that are just kind of pestering this kid for money and being a bully to them? His answer isn't, Light's answer isn't, no, these people aren't committing a heinous act like murder or homicide. I probably shouldn't kill them because they're not murdering people. No, his answer is, I'd better avoid people around me because they bring up suspicion. His thing is not that these guys aren't murderers. I shouldn't hurt them. It's that, no, they're near me. So I don't want to draw suspicion to myself. But then he counters that and says, no, why should I even worry? It's not like I'm going to be found. No one would care if one or two people like him died. And that's the thing too, like the assumption that Light has that these people don't have families. They don't have people that care about them. So no one will miss them. That's the thing too also, is that, yeah, these people that do horrible acts, a lot of them do have people that probably care about them and that they themselves may actually care about. Now, not everybody, and I'm not defending murderers necessarily, but the assumption that Light has that these people that do evil acts, no one will miss them. No one cares about them. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, maybe that could be one of the reasons why they are committing these acts. There's just so many factors to it, and it's so layered and complex. And the way Light goes about it is he just has this narrow tunnel vision view that, oh no, they're evil people, they deserve to die. And the concept of evil is something that I think this series is really going to focus on, because I'm like, oh, this is going to get interesting, because my theory that someone else has the other death note, what if people that Light cares about, suddenly become victims of that second person? I feel like this person who has the second death note and Light, they're going to figure who each other are, and then they're going to start putting people that they care about in jeopardy. And so that's going to become a thing. And so that's going to open up a whole other can of worms. This series, though, really, really surprising how already I'm like getting sucked in. So Maki want to go to the party. Okay, we got all them. So everybody gets out of the prep class. And then I was like, damn it, Mom, come get me. She's not here to pick me up. Okay. And he's like, damn it, it's sickening. Every single one of them. I'd do society a favor by killing them. So yeah, Light just has this assumption of like these people in the world are sickening to him and they just don't need to exist at all. And the world would be better off without them. Now, again, this guy that assaults the woman, Taku, he is scum. The Taku guy. Taku Shibutaku for short. But here's the thing too, okay? So this whole scene with the girl getting assaulted by the guy, it's disgusting and awful. And I'm glad that they cut things off when they do. I really am. But here's the thing. Light is right there by the door when the guy has come up. And he doesn't do anything. He goes in there because he's going to use the notebook. But he doesn't offer her help in that moment. He waits till he's out of sight to write in the notebook. And there's an argument there, obviously, that there were 4 guys there. If he tried to assault her, if Light tried to step in to help, then there's a chance he would have been beaten up. Maybe they would have gotten the death note from him, which would have made him forget everything. And they probably would have thrown it away or something. They probably wouldn't have cared. Who knows? But it probably would. Light's probably his argument probably is 1, him stepping in would have done no good against 4 guys. And 2, he wanted to test out the powers. But I feel like that's a commentary about omniscient power, that if you believe in a god and you're like, they're kind of like their presence is removed. I feel like that's just, and the fact that he's behind a screen doing it, like inside the gas station, there's a clear barrier between him and the people on the outside. It's almost like a commentary on the barrier between God and the human world, that there's like God in heaven, there's a barrier there keeping him from being seen by them. I feel like there's some kind of symbolic gesture there, and he grabs the manga and hides a death note in it. And so I wanted to see, like they try to assault her in that moment, right? And I hate it. It's and Light doesn't necessarily, he says accidental death. Okay, so at this point, he has written names in this book, right? And I'm trying to look here to see if they're similar or different. But he says accidental death. Okay. And he writes down his name. Okay. And wait and see what happens. And so the girl manages to get away. And he goes after her. So yeah. Oh my God. So she did get away somehow. And then he ran after her, and that's when he got hit by the semi. Oh, ho, 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 ho. And that's when Light realizes it's not a coincidence, that it is a death note. And his eyes getting redder. And he's just sitting in the store. Oh my God. So he guesses that it's a Shinigami's. And that's one thing too. Light seems not surprised at all that this monstrous death god is standing in front of him. And it may be a cultural thing because I'm from the West, and Shinigami are not like we think of angels or Grim Reapers as motifs, but we don't have the death god. The Shinigami thing is more so, it's removed culturally. That if I saw a Grim Reaper or an angel in front of me, I would freak the fudge out. I would freak out. Granted, he's had this notebook for 5 days, and it's already he's almost like intoxicated by it. But yeah. So he says, this is curious too. Ryuk waits literally 5 days. Ryuk waits 5 days until he decides he better get going. Like, he's waited till this is kind of sunk in and some time has elapsed before he decides to take action. Again, because he's bored. Because he's bored, and he was just waiting to see what would happen after 5 days. And like, I guess I'll go fetch the notebook and see where it went. And then we cut to him going back. He's like, it's been 5 days since. And he's like, all right, I'd better get going. And they're like, where are you going, Ryuk? And he's like, this place is barren everywhere you go. He's like, I dropped my death note. And then they just laugh at him. They're like, you really messed up big time. Like, yeah, seems like a thing you don't normally should do. And they say, weren't you carrying one around, a second one behind the old man's back? So I'm guessing the old man is God. I'm assuming like the main one. And these are all like Shinigami, like that follow, that are his, that do his bidding. Mm-hmm. And you lost both. And do you know where you dropped it? He's like, the human world. And they're like, what? So I guess that there's multiple worlds that you could drop it in. Okay, interesting. But all the souls coming up, I love it. It's very eerie and ethereal. And I love his wings, his black wings. I love he has the heart earring, like the heart earring, and as the hip thing. It's very 2000s. It's very fashion. Ryuk is fashion forward, clearly. I feel like there were many little heart earring stuff that came after this. Maybe he was a trendsetter. Who knows? But yeah, the transition. And I love the transition, like going to Light's house and everything. So 5 days have passed, right? And Light is not affected at all. He's just like, oh, hey, Mom, I'm back. Like, just seems perfectly normal. And she wants to see his exam results. And I like how this show sets up Light's character in a kind of showing, not telling way, but still giving us like this character where she's like, oh, where's the entrance exam results? And he's like, oh, here you go. And she says, number 1 again. He's like, you really did your best. And his mom kind of looks like him. He's like, well, yeah, I'll be studying, so don't interrupt me. So again, that's very convenient because he's the top of his class. So he's smart. He's got his parents' approval. They're like, oh, you're doing the right things. And he's like, and he wants to be by himself in his room to use the death note. And he's like, I'm studying. And they're like, okay, we won't interrupt you. And of course, he says he wants some apples. And, well, he says nothing at all. He says not really anything, but she brings him the apples anyway. And then I love that his eyes like get red, like the brown eyes turn red. He's like, I already have what I want. And he just locks the door. The animation goes crazy. And he has written a bunch of names. And some of them are in English. So there's like names everywhere. Like there's names in different languages. I'm guessing the names that are not in Japanese, that are in English, are just of people that have been arrested that he's just heard on the news that he's just trying to get rid of, because they're all in. There's a Muhammad, there is a Stats, there is a Winder, a Mary, a Peter, a Tom, Bonk. There's names in all different languages. And it's, oh my gosh, he's just researched. So again, people he has no clue about. He's just researched them. He's like, time to get rid of them. Oh. And he's just so pleased as punch. He's looking at that notebook like, I want to get a picture of that. I've got to get a picture of this. Just like, okay, sure thing. Just pleased as punch of what he's done. And it's just like, just almost drunk. Like the vision's blurry from going over all the names. Like he's written pages upon pages over the last 5 days. I'm like, yeah, this big surge of deaths. And then you seem to like it. Ah! And I love the caveat that only he can see Ryuk, because it's Ryuk's death note. So only he can see it. So in other words, that's going to be a thing too. And I do like that he has a rational freak out. At first. He's like, why are you so shocked? I'm Ryuk, the Shinigami who dropped that notebook. And from what I just saw, you're already aware that that's no ordinary notebook. Oh, I love it. So at first, Light is freaked out. Okay, he's like, oh crap, there's this monster. But he surprisingly adapts very well to the situation, where he's like, oh hey, yeah. Like he gathers his wits about him very quickly, like, oh, Shinigami, huh? Explains why this powerful notebook exists. He's like, I'm not shocked, Ryuk. You just surprised me, that's all. And he's like, I've been waiting for you. And I can't tell if this is a bluff or if he has really figured out that this notebook is probably that of a Shinigami's. So that's the cool thing about Light so far. I'm not entirely certain. We've only got 1 episode's worth of his mindset. And so we've established he's smart, but I'm not exactly sure how good he is at bluffing. He's like, oh. But I think it's fascinating that we get the caveat that only Light can see Ryuk. So whoever, I'm wondering if the person that has the second death note, if they can see Ryuk as well. But I wonder if Light, so Ryuk will be present to both of them, essentially. But if there were other Shinigami that dropped their death notes, would Light only be able to see Ryuk and not the other Shinigami because the other Shinigami is tied to that other death note? That's what's going to be interesting to see in this world building if we get there. After seeing its results, I can act with certainty. So he's like, okay, this notebook, you've just explained to me how the notebook works. It's a Shinigami's notebook. That explains the magic behind it. He's like, okay, the rationale is explained. And then Ryuk's like, okay, well, you're a surprising kid. You're not freaked out. He's like, I've heard of death notes getting down to the human world a few times before. Okay, but you're the first one to use it to this extent in just 5 days. Yeah, because then he's going to talk about why. He says, I'm prepared. I used the death note knowing it belonged to a Shinigami. And now the Shinigami's here. See, I had wondered that too. I thought that him not writing the report after, because you're supposed to write that report after their death. I thought him not writing the report would get Ryuk's attention. And there's like some caveat that says if you don't fill out the report, the wrath of the Shinigami will be upon you, or you'll be stalked yourself, or something like that. I thought that Ryuk would show up and be like, hey, you didn't write the report, now I gotta punish you. But no, that's not it at all. Because he says, what's gonna happen to me? This is where I love this episode. Like, he's like, are you going to take my soul? Like, he was expecting that to happen, but he's like, I'm gonna do. So that explains why Light wrote so many names in the book like he did, because he was expecting Ryuk to come and take his soul. He'd be like, before I die, I want to do as much good as possible. And it's so weird because Light is coming from a place of good intentions by this, because yeah, that sounds so enticing, right? I'm going to save the world by killing all the bad guys, right? But there's so many factors. I'm like, oh no. And I feel like Even though Ryuk doesn't say, he kind of does. Well, let's talk about this. He says, what's that about? It's like, steal your soul. Is that some fantasy you humans came up with? I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm not going to do anything to you. That's a big thing too. He says, I'm not going to do anything to you. Ryuk's like, I'm not going to take your soul. Now, whether or not the god of this world, the overarching, like seeming old man that the Shinigami answer to, if he does something, we don't know yet. But Light is shocked that there's no, he says, once the Death Note lands in the human world, it belongs to the human world. So it can never go back. In other words, that belongs to you. And he's like, it belongs to me. And he's like, if you don't want it, then give it to some other human. But if you do that, all memory of the Death Note will be erased from your memory. So in other words, all the names, I guess, will erase from the pages if it passes on to somebody else. Because it'll be like a blank slate. It'll be like a reset button. It'll just restart. And Light will forget it ever happened. And he says, so there isn't a price for using the Death Note? And I'm like, ooh! And I love his answer. Well, if anything, there's only the fear and pain humans who have used the Death Note will experience. That's the price, right? Because it's like, that's what's so fascinating, is that he's like, a price? Yeah, if you write someone's name and they die, that's going to weigh on your conscience. The fear and pain you will experience. And I don't know if it is exactly from the fear and pain that you experience while using the Death Note, realizing that you were responsible for all. Because I'm just waiting now. I'm waiting for somebody to approach Light, like for Light to come in contact with a family member or a spouse or a friend of someone that he killed, and for them to like lament to him like their actual story, or that it was someone that was convicted as guilty but was actually innocent. I'm just waiting for that person to come into contact with Light, and for Light to realize he took their life and maybe it wasn't justified, and then for him to for that to weigh on his conscience. Or it's either that, or it's the pain and fear humans who have used the Death Note will experience after they no longer are using it. So he kind of goes into detail about that a little bit. And Light's like, he says, and when you die, I'll be the one to write your name on my Death Note. So yeah. And don't think for a moment that any human who used the Death Note can go to heaven or hell. So that's the thing too. If they don't go to heaven or hell once they use the Death Note, do they become a Shinigami? Because he has a Death Note, so do they become Shinigami in turn? Is that their punishment? They aren't allowed to go to the afterlife. They aren't allowed to go to heaven or hell. They're just stuck in this Shinigami realm, in this limbo, as a Shinigami themselves. I don't know. That seems like it would make sense, but I don't know. He's like, that's all. And so that's kind of Light's kind of screwed because he's already used the Death Note, so he can no longer go to heaven or hell. He's like, you'll just feel pain and pain and fear, from using this Death Note. Now, whether it's while you're alive or after you've died, he doesn't specify. So it's like, oh, okay. And at that point, if it had been me, I'd have freaked out, because I guess there's two ways to look at it. You either freak out being like, I've just doomed myself to this life in limbo, whatever that amounts to, or you just embrace it. And you're like, well, I've screwed myself, so can't go back, so it can only move forward, right? And so that seems to be what Light does, is that he just stares at him. He's like, you'll find out about it after you die. That's the creepiest thing. I'm like, well, what's going to happen when he dies? And that's when they get interrupted by the mom. And he says, don't worry, you can go ahead. She's not going to see me. And he puts the book under his desk, and that's when she gives him the apples. They're from our neighbor. A good neighbor, huh? And she's like, why is it so dark in here? What you doing? You'll ruin your eyesight. Turn some light on. And he's like, okay. And he's like, the notebook originally belonged to me. And since you're the one using it, you're the only one who can see me. Okay, so after the notebook passes on to somebody else, though, or Light dies, then he won't be able to see Ryuk anymore. It's a bond between Light the human and Ryuk the Shinigami. Yeah, so it's very Black Butlerish, and like there's a contract here, but if Light dies, we don't know what's gonna happen. I think he'll turn into a Shinigami. I think he'll turn into Shinigami because the fact that Ryuk has like the little heart chain and stuff and the hip thing, it seems like it's tied to like a former human. I just seem like it's tied, like he was once human or something. I don't know. And he's like, tasty. It's so funny, this humor. Why did you choose me? And this part's great too, where he's like, choose you? Apples in the human world are awesome. I love he says juicy. Yeah, what would you call them? And he's like, answer my question. He's like, I didn't choose you. No, I just dropped the notebook. I love that. There's no fate. There's no pre-planned destiny. He's like, did you think you're some chosen one because you're smart? And that's the thing too. I think he did. I think that Light was like, in other stories, it's like, why did you choose me? Is it because I have like ties to, royal blood? Is it because I have ties to like this other world? Is it because I'm the chosen one because of X, Y, and Z? No. Is it because I'm smart? No. It's just Ryuk's like, I dropped my notebook, waiting to see who picked it up, and you're the smart one, but in the end, you chose to pick it up. You are the one that set your own fate. Like, it's very a self-determined destiny sort of thing. He's like, there's no reason. He's like, don't flatter yourself. And I like that, like, it's kind of offended at that. He's like, oh. He's like, it just happened to fall around here and you just happened to pick it up. That's all there is to it. I love it. I love just how simple it is. And it explains why he wrote it in English, the most, like, understood, the most popular language in the human world. He just wrote it in English because that was the most likely to be read by anybody. So, which is kind of sinister because he's just like, I just wrote it so that anybody could pick it up. He's like, then why did you drop it? Don't tell me it was by mistake. After you went to the trouble, and he was like, why'd I drop it? And I love this, because I was bored. I love that it zooms in on his face. He's like, because I had nothing to do. Like, I love that it spits in the face of so many narratives that are like, oh, it's this big preordained planned affair that's tied to prophecies and ancient things and mystical foretellings of the future. No, this death god was bored and he dropped a notebook in the human world to see if anybody picked it up and what would happen if he was going to stay bored or not. And Light Yagami just happened to find it. And I'm sure in Light's mind, he's like, that kind of feels like fate to him, right? Shinigami these days have too much time on their hands. They're napping or gambling. If you see them studying studiously, scribbling names in the death note, they'll say, what are you working so hard for? And laugh at you. So it's weird. There's like a human quality to all of these Shinigami, which makes me think they were once humans who used the death note and were punished by staying in this limbo. He's like, writing the names of other Shinigami don't work. Yeah, you can't kill yourself. That's the thing, too. He's like, you don't get to go to heaven or hell. So I'm like, you'll become a Shinigami yourself and be stuck in this limbo where you can't die. You just have to stay here for eternity because that's kind of like your punishment sort of thing, right? I don't know. I could be wrong. It's no fun at all to kill people who live in the human world. So I figured it would be more fun to come down here myself. And I wonder if Ryuk was a human before, like the locket that's in the chain, maybe he loved someone and they were killed by someone and so he used the death note to like get revenge on them. Maybe. I just feel like Ryuk was once a human that used the death note for whatever reason, and then this was their punishment, was to come to this world and be a Shinigami. I don't know! And then, but you sure wrote a lot of names. But why'd you write down the cause of death only for that guy who was hit by the truck? And then I love that Light's fate is like, it's so lit up and animated. He's like, without the cause of death written down, they'll all die of heart attacks. That's the best thing about the Death Note, Ryuk. He's like, It's like, what? I can write down the names of the criminals and slowly reduce the number of evil. So he doesn't answer the question directly. And he's like, well, what's the point? Any fool can figure out if someone is just eliminating the bad guys. That makes me a little concerned. I want the world to know of my existence and that there's someone who is passing judgment upon them. And he's like, Ryuk's like, oh, but what's the point of passing judgment? So I love that he's like so enticed. He's like, okay, you human, you're interesting. You're different and misunderstood. But yeah, because it's almost like Light wants to become this heroic figure. Like, I want to be known for like the good I'm doing in the world, right? That I'm setting the world free of all this sin and evil. He's like, what's the point of passing judgment? Why do it? And I love that he's like, I was bored too. And I love that Ryuk's like, naturally, I didn't believe it at first, but the Death Note has the supernatural power to tempt people to want to try it at least once. And then I like that we went from, I killed him, like he's like, these two men, I killed him. So Light does show remorse. Like he shows like, shit, I killed these two people. I've done something bad. Like, what have I done? That sort of thing. And he's like, human lives shouldn't be taken so lightly. Yes. Which it's insane because he's going through all these things that naturally come to your mind. Like, yeah, you shouldn't take human life lightly, right? Do I have the right to judge people like that? No. Yeah, it's just, he says no. But then he convinces himself. He's like, no, I'm not wrong, right? It's such a human thing to do. It's relatable. Like, yeah, like in your head, it's natural to feel two different ways about this. You either feel like, no, I have no right to pass. Because here's the thing. I'm very much the type of person that I'm like, I have no right to judge anybody's life. No right to do that. Everybody comes from such, I've met so many people over the years and had so many friends that have such different life experiences from my own that I'm like, I cannot judge these people. Like decisions that they make, I'm like, I have no clue their circumstance, why they did that sort of thing, what the reasoning behind it was. How can I pass judgment upon them? Because I have no clue their lives or their life story and am so far removed from it. So you can look at it that way. And that's kind of how he starts out in this. But then it's almost like that intelligence. It's like the forbidden fruit, right? The forbidden fruit of knowledge. Like Light is smart. And so he says, no, me be wrong? No, I'm not wrong. And he gets like this conviction and resolve, right? He says, I always thought about this. The world is rotten and rotten people should die. It's like A plus B equals C. And he's like, this has always been my conviction. And now I have the chance to do something about it. So that's the other thing. Like you have some people but honestly, even though I'm the type of person that I say that, if you gave me this notebook, would I be able to turn it away and do nothing? I think any of us would be tempted, right? But it's so weird, this temptation. Any of us could be tempted, right? And in his circumstance, he's bombarded by this media constantly around him. And that he's convinced himself the world is filled with rotten people and it's cruel and it should change. And he's like, if the tools of change are at his disposal. And so he's like, I can do this. And so I can't exactly be upset at him for taking matters into his own hands. We, the audience, kind of have we see the overarching, the bigger picture of it all. But it's so relatable because any of us, if we were given the opportunity to change the world in a positive way, like him saving those kids. Yeah, if you'd give me the notebook and in front of me was somebody that was like threatening to kill a bunch of little kids, would I write in the notebook? I probably would. That's the thing. Like I'd come out and say, I say I'm like this, but in Light's situation, especially at the very beginning, and if I saw a woman being assaulted by that guy, yeah, I probably would write his name in the book. And Light dodges the question. But when he says, why'd you write that? It's because Light had the actual experience of seeing him commit that heinous act. And that's why he wrote down the actual cause of death, because he wanted that man to suffer for what he did. And honestly, I don't blame him. I probably would have done the same. That's the crazy part. It's just what happens afterwards, where Light's like, okay, rotten people should die. And this is my chance. And he's like, someone must do it. Somebody has to get their hands bloody, right? And then even if it means sacrificing one's conscience and life, things can't stay like this. Y'all, go back to the beginning of this reaction when I was talking about spoilers. Go back, listen to that again. But at this moment in time, I was just like, Attack on Titan. That's all I could think about. I was like, oh my God, yeah. Somebody has to get their hands dirty. The world is filled with these cruel people. Someone has to take them out. Might as well be me, right? But it gets so complicated. it gets so complicated because, yeah. And I love the montage. He's like, even if someone else had picked up the death note, would they be able to erase unwanted people from the result? And that's the thing, too. Light says someone has to be willing to sacrifice. Somebody has to be the martyr to sacrifice themselves to do the deed that no one else would do. And so at first, he kind of goes through this weird range of things where he starts out as, he has a very human response of being like, he has a very like moral human response of, oh my God, I took a life. How could I do this? This is wrong. To transitioning to, well, wait a minute. Someone needs to step up and be a martyr and sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And if I have to sacrifice my soul, you know, if a Shinigami comes and takes my soul, at least I can say I helped make the world a better place by taking out these evil people. And then it gets to the end of the episode where he's like, I'm going to be a god. So like in the span of one episode, we go through the whole range of motions. But in between that whole god situation and the I'm going to be a martyr to sacrifice myself for the greater good, he kind of goes to that saying, well, it has to be me. If anybody else had picked up the notebook, would they be able to do what I'm about to do? Would they have the resolve that I have? And he doesn't think that that's true. He says, no way. But I can do it. And then we get this amazing, in fact, I'm the only one who can do it. And we have the light shine down on his book, and it's written in English. And I want to read what this says. Throughout most of history, technology and the number of humans grew slowly because the birth and death rates were nearly equal. But now the human race numbers about 5.4 billion and has spread to every continent. Our numbers and our world transforming technology have reached such frightening proportions, we have become a danger to ourselves. Sagan talked about 3 environmental problems as aspects of this danger. One is the destruction of the Earth's forests. We're destroying 1 acre of forest every second, and if this continues at this rate, there may be only 1 or 2 generations left before forests cease to exist. Another is the extinction of many species on the planet. So this book is outlining the overpopulation problem, and that there needs to be population control, or the world's going to cease to be inhabitable. As Light's having this conversation about becoming a god and eliminating the evil from the world. How fun. How fun. How fun is that? I'm going to love this series. I can tell already. He says, and I will change things with the death note, and I'll change the world. And the light comes on his face. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then that's when we get this big, okay, this is the meme I have seen. I have seen this meme of people just falling down and dying, and it's from this moment. Yeah, it's from him like writing and becoming like a conductor, like a grand orchestrator, like just the pin sliding, like it's, you know, like he's a maestro and it's his and it's his stick, you know. Oh my God. But this is the meme I've seen. So I'm glad that everything I knew about Death Note before watching the show has been addressed in the first episode. So after this, I have no clue what's going to happen from here on in. Everything I knew about the show is in this episode. Oh my God. And he says, at first, I kept writing the names of criminals like I was cleaning up the world, so that in time, no one would do evil. While those guilty ones who truly deserve to be punished for their crimes die of heart attacks. Okay. So the ones who are truly... This is interesting, though, because he makes the comment early on in this that the power of the Death Note is you can either have them instantly die of a heart attack like that, done, or you can make them suffer. And interestingly, what he says here is that what he establishes is that in writing their names, he says, while those guilty ones who truly deserve to be punished for their crimes would die of heart attacks, people who are immoral or harass others will be slowly erased through illness or accidents. So that's the thing. The people, that's the other thing about this. You would think that the people, by the logic of the heart attack being the easy death and the accidental deaths being the suffering, you would think it'd be reversed. You'd think that he'd want the ones who were guilty and truly committed heinous acts to be wiped out through accident or illness, and the ones who harassed, because the harassing ones, like through illness or accidents, that's going to be the painful death. So, like that's interesting. But then the world would truly move in the right direction. And I love this though, that, you know, up until now, every time that Light has talked about doing this great deed of ridding the world of evil through the Death Note, the light has shined on him like a beacon, like yes, this is the right answer. But when he says, then the world would truly move in the right direction, the sunlight is blocked by a pillar. Like, wait a minute. Like, are you sure about that? He says, I would create a new world of earnest, kind humans. And then that's when Ryuk comes in with the big reveal, like, then you'd be the only one left with a bad personality. Because, yeah, we've talked about, this isn't really a spoiler, but in shows like Attack on Titan, one of the big themes in the show is that the idea of good and evil, of right and wrong, is more subjective than you think. Because there are so many factors that tie into it. And one person's evil is another person's justified. One person's good is another person's evil. And so, or another person's exploitation. So Ryuk is saying, yeah, this whole thing about ridding the world of evil, you're going to kill everybody but yourself. Because you're going to think you're not evil and everyone else is by the end of this. Because you're just going to have a bad personality. You'll be the only one left for the bad personality, because he's like, no, all humans are capable of evil and may commit at any time. So you'll be the only person left if that's your logic. And that kind of goes back, there's a character in Attack on Titan who says conflict will always exist. There will always be an enemy to someone. Someone will always be viewed as evil as long as humanity exists, because that's just human nature. And so, oh my God. And Light's like, huh? What are you saying? Like, it doesn't click. He can't see it. And he's like, Ryuk. And here's his justification. He has this like just sincere look on his face. Like he looks like just such an honor student, like such a Boy Scout. He's like, I'm probably the best, most diligent student in Japan. And Ryuk's like, your ego. He thinks that makes you good? Oh, he says, and I will become the god of this new world. And Ryuk's like, oh, okay. He's like, humans are interesting after all. Okay. So it may not even be, we don't know for sure if humanity is the only, it's kind of the question of, is Earth like, you know, the only world out there with life, you know? And are there other worlds with life? And do they have a god? Is it just one god ruling over eternity and all worlds in the entire solar system and universe? And this kind of seems like maybe that sort of scenario, that there is like one omniscient being. The Shinigami kind of serve under them. And then there are different worlds of different races and beings. And humanity is just one. And maybe there's other realms, like other portals that the Shinigami can go into. And so he's like, wow, humans are interesting. Maybe Ryuk may have even been from another world and another race. We don't know, and became a Shinigami. But Light just looks out the window with the light shining on him. Like he just feels like so entitled, like, I'm doing great. And his eyes are red like the apple, right? It's red like the apple. Like just the eye color change, the light shining down. And that's the episode. I don't know if I'll bring out Whiteboard Coon. Whiteboard Coon helps me explain things. I don't know if I'll bring out Whiteboard Coon specifically for this show, but I feel like I've talked for over an hour about this first episode. I've talked for over an hour. I definitely feel like this is going to be a show that's going to have a lot of long discussions. I don't know if I'll bring out Whiteboard Coon or not. Don't know if it'll need to be brought out, because that's the thing. This is a modern world. It is not a fantasy world. It is not a dystopian future world. It is very much a world that is bound by the constructs primarily of our own. And so I kind of like that about this show, is that it's taking place in a modern setting, in a modern world. The only supernatural elements are that of the Shinigami at this point, and of Ryuk himself. So, oh my God, guys. Yeah. Okay. So, this episode was great. I'm on board. I feel like I watched Attack on Titan first, and now I'm getting into Neon Genesis and Death Note, and I feel like that was such a good decision in hindsight, because that show has opened up. If you've not watched Attack on Titan, it is such a show. It seems like this one thing, and the more you get into it, the more it just opens up all these different thematic elements. It's talking about politics, about world, themes, and society constructs, and just ideologies and philosophies. And so I feel like watching that show has been such a nice, in the weirdest of ways, it came after Death Note and Neon Genesis, and it's definitely influenced by these shows, I can already tell. And so it's going to be kind of cool to take what I've learned from that show and what you all have talked with me about it and start applying it to this. But Light, my dude. Oh, honey. He already strikes me as a Shakespearean tragic character. He is a Hamlet. He is very much thinking that he is doing the right thing, and it is going to come back to bite him in the ass so hard at some point. I'm just predicting it. It's going to come back and bite him. And Ryuk's like, yep, it is. And I'm here for it. Ryuk's like, okay, cool, kid. I was bored, and now I have something fun to watch out for. So let's do this. What a duo. So I have some questions moving forward. One, are we going to get feedback about the reports? Don't spoil me on this. This is just my going into episode 2. Here are my thoughts. Are we going to get feedback about the reports that we got in this episode? Ryuk has lost his other Death Note. Is it in the human world, and who has it? Go see with that. 3 is my biggest question in all of this is Light going to stay with just killing who he deems are evil people, and how that gets defined and how that maintains, because he wants people to know that he's doing this. That seems like a terrible idea. I'm like, here's the one thing about it. I'm like, Light is there's such an ego there, because they've just established that if you get this Death Note taken away from you, you will forget about it. So if he advertises he has this Death Note to everyone and people start targeting him to take it away from him, if he forgets, they can just kill him. And that's it. Game over. And maybe that's going to be the point of the story, is it's like a fall from grace, and this human that thought you could play God and the ramifications of that. But I love that Ryuk, like, there is no preordained destiny. There's no prophecy in this story. There's no royal family that Light is related to. No, blood of some other earthly supernatural creature that's in his veins. No, he's just a kid that's too smart for his own good, that finds this omniscient item and decides to take action with it. Okay. I'm on board with Death Note. I am. We're only one episode in. I'm on board already, so yay. But this is going to be our Saturdays from here for the next 36 weeks. Just going through it. I'm excited. I hope y'all are too. But if you have any questions or any comments down below, please no spoilers. But I'm so curious to know your thoughts. But yeah, I'm pretty hyped up about this episode. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 2 of Death Note. Bye.